Hi, my name is John Gauthier, and I'm excited to present today some highlights from our paper, The Neural Dynamics of Auditory Word Recognition and Integration. Speech comprehension is a highly predictive process. As you listen to me speak this sentence, you're using context in order to form expectations about what word might come next, and you're integrating sensory input relative to those expectations in order to form a percept of the word that you're hearing. In this talk, I'll split this process of word perception into two parts. First, the process of recognition, in which listeners infer the word intended by the speaker, and integration, in which, given a recognized word, listeners update their representation of the utterance meaning as a whole. And we know a lot about this latter process of integration, and I'll focus today on the neural correlates of word integration as measured in scalp EEG. And I'm referring here to the phenomenon of the N400. The N400 is a negative voltage modulation measurable via scalp EEG, whose amplitude is indexed by word surprisal. That's its negative log probability in context. And I'll show you what that looks like, an estimate of the N400 in EEG recordings as human subjects listened to naturalistic speech stimuli. So in this chart, I'm showing you the onset of a word at x equals 0, and we'll estimate how the scalp voltage is deflected according to the word surprisal. So more negative values here indicate that we have a more negative deflection in scalp voltage for more surprising words. So here's the shape of the N400 effect, with this negative deflection peaking around 400 milliseconds post-word onset. This effect has been replicated all over the place in both controlled and naturalistic experiments. But one puzzling background assumption behind this effect is that there's a primacy of the integration process, right? So integration doesn't differ in terms of computational state or latency, depending on the state of that antecedent process of recognition. And this project was designed in order to test that idea. We did that by designing a computational model first of the cognitive process of word recognition. That model is going to output particular predictions about the mental state of the listener as they hear words in a speech stimulus. We then built enhanced models of the neural correlate of integration, trying to track whether those distinctions about word recognition manifested in any way in the downstream neural response. So the data we're trying to explain is open data contributed by Micha Halbrand and others, in which 19 adult subjects listened to Ernest Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea. It's about an hour of audio. And we're trying to predict a multivariate EEG time series at 5 sensors across the scalp, bilaterally at central and parietal locations, where we expect to see the N400 response come out very strongly based on lots of prior work. So we first introduced our cognitive model here, which we call a noisy channel word recognition model. So in this model, we say that listeners are doing the job of trying to infer what word the speaker is intending to say as a function of a context, that's a sequence of preceding words, and some incremental acoustic phonetic input, here represented as a sequence of IPA phones. And our model can actually play out in stimulus time as the listener receives more phones of input. How beliefs over possible lexical items might change. So here we're showing actually in actual stimulus time relative to when the phones have onset in the audio stimulus, how those beliefs form. We turn this into a model of word recognition by saying recognition is an event which happens just when the listener's belief in the ground truth word exceeds some threshold T. So T here is shown as a vertical line on the degree of belief axis. And it's just when belief exceeds that threshold that we call a word recognized. So for a given threshold setting T, this model can predict the given time point then at which any token in the corpus is recognized. So to constrain this value T, we'll link these predictions of the cognitive model together with a refined model of the N400 that we already saw earlier in this presentation. So I'll explain this by first introducing you to the distribution of word recognition times predicted by our optimal model. So this is a distribution relative to word onset of the predicted recognition times of our model. And these salmon lines indicate a tertile split of the data into the lower, middle, and upper third of recognition times. We'll call it that the early, mid, and late regions of recognition time. So we find, according to our optimal model, that 2/3 of words are recognized prior to 159 milliseconds post-word onset. So what we can do now is estimate a model of the neural response to words like we saw before, but which can incorporate this distinction between early, mid, and late recognized words. So concretely, we'll stipulate then that words in each bin can receive a totally different response in the neural signal. So we'll estimate independent EEG modulations for words in each bin. So we'll see a new version of that original plot where we estimate the signal modulation in scalp EEG due to word surprisal, but now for 3 different types of words that receive different treatment in terms of recognition. So the response to word surprisal for early and mid recognized words looks pretty consistent and similar to before. We see this negative deflection centered around 400 milliseconds. But the response to late recognized words looks quite different. We see actually a significant deflection in the amplitude of that response for late recognized words. And it turns out this model actually does better than our baseline, the baseline that I showed you at the start of this talk, and predicting held out EEG data. So it's by that distinction that we're doing better at explaining the data. So that distinction actually suggests a difference in the computational treatment of words during integration based on their status in recognition. That cutoff around 150 milliseconds indicates a different outcome in the downstream integration process. We next asked about the temporal relationship between recognition latency and integration latency. So we did that by taking the extremes of the recognition time distribution, these early and late words, and asking whether they had any corresponding difference in latency to peak integration response. And we found actually no significant difference in latency to peak negative modulation. So while integration seems to be very sensitive to the state of recognition or the outcome of recognition, temporal it seems to be yoked not to recognition, but actually to word onset. There are many more models we're testing in our paper, which you can find at this QR code. I'll thank my PhD advisor, Roger Levy, for his support, and to all of you for listening. Thanks.